It's said that in Cuba people always talk about two things, baseball and weather forecasts. And it's because everybody knows a little bit about these things. Will it rain? Is a hurricane approaching? People find out every night at the news shows. Today we will meet the head of the National Forecast Center, probably the most famous scientist here in Cuba.
Well, this is the Institute of Meteorology, the site of the Cuban National Meteorological Service. This building was built in 1908. It was built when this place was founded, the observatory, the National Observatory for all Cubans. But at that time, there was only 7 meteorological stations. There was no radar, nothing, a very small meteorological service. From 1965, with the revolution, well, we have here the Institute of Meteorology. The Institute of Meteorology is our organization of research and also of the meteorological service. Has several national centers, one national center for climatology, for pollution. In my case, I'm the director of the National Forecast Center, who have to be with daily weather forecast that every night, every evening, everybody is waiting at the TV show and newscast. But also, it is very important in the case of hazardous weather, because we made the process of watches and warnings on hurricanes and other severe weather.
Doctor, and talking about the importance of this center, National Forecast Center, and you were talking about how people wait every night to see you or the other meteorologists to know about what's going to be the weather like the next day, which is very important. It's like a tradition here in Cuba. But I think one of the most interesting facts about this kind of service in Cuba is the fact that when a big hurricane hits us, almost no one dies. I mean, you see the figures all over the world, and they're awful. I mean, 200,000 people, and here in Cuba it's 1, 2, 3, maybe 10 in some cases, and it's a big problem. The government takes a lot of care about this. Why Cuba, even though it's a poor country in terms of resources, has this kind of service of this quality, and how come the numbers, the figures of dead people are so low?
Well, I think that there's multiple factors. In the first place, you mentioned about how Cuban people wait for the weather presentation of meteorologists in the evening newscast. That's one point, because of the culture that people has got in all these years. That's one. Also because we have a good forecast system. We have a good warning and watch system. Meteorologists, weathermen, are the ones that are before the TV cameras and explains in very easy words.
They're not anchors, they're scientists.
Scientists, but scientists that has some knowledge of communication. And they communicate with people in plain language, avoiding any meteorological or weather jargon, scientific jargon, not at all. And then they say in few words, very clear words, as if they were explaining to his mother, his wife or son, something very difficult to explain, but say it very easy, plain words. That's another point. The other point is that the government and the civil defense received the same message in a very clear language. So everybody knows what to expect. And when the civil defense are on TV and the weathermen are on TV, people has a great credibility in their message. So everything is prepared. When the civil defense says that you must evacuate, everybody rush to evacuate.
Like a discipline.
Yes, but the conscience, with conscience, awareness that creates that discipline.
I imagine, doctor, that probably sometimes you've made some mistakes because you're like saying something that is supposed to happen. You've told me before it's not a exact science. You have to have experience. You have to make a lot of analysis with all the information that you have. Have you made big mistakes, I imagine?
Well, not really big mistakes, but of course, the weather forecast is a science that is not accurate, it's not exact. We try to be accurate, but the 100% assessment of the weather forecast is not achieved in any country, neither the developed ones, and of course, not the underdeveloped ones. But we have achieved great success. We have annually about 93%, 94%.
That's high.
Yes, it is very high. It is comparable with Europe or the United States.
You mean the coincidence between what you forecast and what happened?
Yes, yes. We have a computer system that evaluates, assess the quality of the forecast. So you forecasted these meteorological weather variables, and then you got this in our weather station measurements. So they compare, and the amount of quality is that number, 93, 94%. And it is very important. But also very important is that we have accustomed people to to pay attention to our weather forecast in the TV. Because suppose you have the 100% quality weather forecast. That doesn't exist anywhere. But you have it on the drawer, and nobody knows it. It has no sense. It has no
utility.
No
it's
value,
not useful.
no value for people, no social value. But people understand the weather, and people know that tomorrow it is going to rain, or it is not. Maybe it is not as accurate as we would want, because you say, well, there will be scattered showers, and sometimes you see that from this block on, you have rain, and where you are, there is no rain at all. So it has the difference. But people has known how to compare the weather and what to expect of the weather forecast.
No, but you know, I've been with you in several occasions, and you are like the rock star of weather. So people always ask you, you know, Dr. Rubiera, what's going to happen? And people even blame you if you're wrong, or any of the other meteorologists are wrong. You know, these people don't know anything about it. Or when you're right, he said it would be right. How do you face this? When you're on the streets, I know everybody stops you, wants to take pictures with you, they talk to you. If you said it will rain and it did not, what do you do? How do you face that?
Simply tell the truth. When the weather forecast was not good, next time I'm on TV, I say, well, the weather was different, completely different as we told you yesterday, but it was because this and this and this. And it is also a way of people to learn meteorology. So that's very interesting because people believe more in you, even more at that time, because you gave them an explanation, a clear explanation, they understand, and they even increase the knowledge of meteorology they have.
And you're the first, you're a founder. You were the first person that did this news forecast in a TV show. And it was a lot of years ago, but I want to hear briefly the story of how all this started, because you've said one of the reasons why in Cuba this early alert system when hurricanes hits us and all that is because people have conscious culture about it, the habit of listening to the news forecast and what's going on the next day. How did all this start?
Well, in the 70s, it was usual to listen to people in the street, calling our organization, that is Institute of Meteorology, They say in Spanish, it's very difficult to say it in English, but in Spanish would be Instituto de Mentirología, that's Institute of Liars, lying persons. But it was at that time. And the weather forecast was only a sheet of paper that the anchor and the TV newsroom
used to read.
Yes, used to read, and then the piece of paper with a weather map that was shown by the camera, and nobody understood anything. But from 1981, I started this daily weather forecast on the TV, a presentation that is weighted today every evening in the newscast, the main newscast. Then the culture was increasing time at a time. In any hurricane, the TV makes a full coverage of the hurricane. We scientists are on TV explaining, as I said before, in plain language, all about it. And we don't have any time allotted. It can be on air 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the case, and also increasing the frequency of presentations as the hurricane moved on and is near us. So at the very beginning, we may start we have 4 daily weather forecasts a day in Cuba. But when the hurricane is approaching, maybe we double this frequency of appearances.
You move here to the
yes,
center.
Yes, and we have it here next door. We have a set for cameras, a big TV screen. We broadcast live the latest information almost once every hour, and many times Telesul has broadcasts also from here. So our audience could have some kind of knowledge about what we do.
It takes a lot of technology to do this, Doctor, even though also well-educated people, and we will talk about it later. And I know that this is not the only place. You need information from all over the country. You have like several centers in every province. It's like a network. This has grown a lot.
Yes, we have 15 provincial centers. We have 8 weather radars that covers the entire country and the surrounding seas. We have satellites, well, not satellite, but satellite station to pick up the satellite signals, and to have in our computers the satellite imagery, even moving satellite imagery. So we have good technology, but we rely much on people, because I always say that there are unknown heroes in our weather stations. There are men and women that devote their lives to watching the weather, to measuring the instruments. And now we have automatic stations, and we don't have to do it
manually.
Yes, manually. But we still have manual stations, because these people can go out in the middle of the hurricane and measure and tell us what they see, and that's very important. No instrument can do it. But we also have an automatic weather station network nowadays. Well, we are open to new technology, but we also have experience of many people working in meteorology in the country.
And that needs also a lot of people. I know that the meteorology profession career to study in the university was opened a few years ago. And you have here a lot of young people. Years ago, it was your face of the other weatherman, which was very loved by this country, Eduardo Lima. But now there are a lot of people doing it. Girls, young people, young men too, which is very important. So do you think that's covered, the future?
Yes, the future is covered. We have a good deal of students that comes. After graduate, they are 2 years of training, and then after that 2 years, they began working. And many of them are on the TV show, in the early morning show, also in the midday show, We the others start in the evening
In the
and
evening.
late
But
night.
probably that will change too. Probably that
Yes.
will change too. Professor, I've known, recently we've known about a very important news for Cuba that has to do with the normalization of diplomatic relations between United States and Cuba, which is a very old problem that's we're probably facing the solution now because of the will of the President Barack Obama and Raúl Castro, our president. But I know that the relations of this institute and this, let's say, science field in Cuba with the United States has always been good. You've had a lot of cooperation, and I wanted could be like an experience of how United States and Cuba can help each other in what they have and what they can do. Tell me a little bit about this experience.
Well, I think it's true. But you have to take into consideration that hurricanes move from one place to the other. They don't need a visa, they don't need immigration. They freely go from one place to another.
Destroying a lot of things.
Yes,
and lives.
And the same happens with winter storms that have hit Cuba and come from the United States to Cuba without asking for anybody's permission. So it is something natural, I think. But in history, for instance, when Hurricane Flora hit Cuba in 1963,
a tragedy.
it was only 1 year after the Mississippi crisis, or October crisis, as Cubans used to call it. And there are written correspondence between the director of the National Cuban Observatory at that time, that belonged to the Army, and with the Weather Bureau in the United States at that time. So it is very old relation. And now I have many good friends in the National Forecast Center in the United States, in the National Hurricane Center, and they have come to Cuba, I have come there, and we exchange information, we exchange warning and watches information, radar, weather observation, land, well, everything. And additionally, the U.S. planes for reconnaissance in the hurricanes, the hurricane hunters, are allowed to fly to Cuba and overfly Cuba in the case of a hurricane. So it has
The
been
ones that watch the hurricanes.
yes, because this kind of planes get into the hurricane circulation to measure inside the body of the hurricane at several heights. So it is not exactly a bilateral cooperation, but it's a cooperation between scientists on both sides of the Florida Straits. So that's very important. And yes, I believe it is a good ground for the future.
What do you think, how do you think it would help if finally the blockade is removed to the meteorology science here in Cuba?
Well, we have big problems with getting technology. Our technology is not an updated one because we cannot buy anything.
In the United States.
In the United States, not a single pin. So that's the problem. And if the blockade ends, that could be a good thing because we could have more updated technology. Now we have to buy technology in Europe or in China, very far away. And
which is more expensive, makes it
yes,
more expensive.
more expensive because you have to pay for the payload on ships or planes. So it is a long travel. And I think that we help in getting better technology and also improving the cooperation because nowadays we have a cooperation, but it is a national one. It is not something written. We have an operational plan for a hurricane committee and the whole region, that's true. And in this framework, we work together, but not bilaterally. So I think it would be important if Cuba and the United States could have a normal relationship, respectful relationship, and many problems could be solved that way.
We are on that path.
Yep.
It looks like we're on that path. That's a very, very important. When you decided to become a meteorologist, doctor, did you imagine that you would be the face of the weather forecast in Cuba? Did you imagine that?
Well, it was a long time ago, but no, I didn't realize
But
it.
you dream about it.
It was a dream, maybe. But I remember that when I was a child, I played with my sister, making TV programs. But I
I
never
think you
thought
were
I was.
an actor first, and then
No, because it was a camera made out of a box with some kind of tube, like a lens. It was a fake lens, of course. But was just children playing, but I never thought that it would become a reality, that it could be before TV cameras and to be before millions of people talking about weather.
that's a big responsibility at the same time.
A big responsibility, because to be the face and to be the voice of the Meteorological Service.
And I would add to that a very, let's say, our country is more complicated than others probably, because I'd imagine, doctor, that having the tension of receiving in any moment the call from the president, like you did so many times. Fidel Castro watched everything about it, was very close, like Raúl Castro now, about all this, about what's going on. How does it feel?
Well,
I mean, they're so smart, they're so into this, trying to know about it, and you were the voice, the face, the responsible for everything. How that feels?
Yes, well, I wouldn't say it was overwhelming, but it was a very hard burden. But I had it gladly, not only because they called over the phone, because they came here. And I have the privilege of working with Fidel, many hurricanes. He asked for everything. You know something, you are working the hurricane and you are getting science inside of it. But when he asked you something, it was something that also the people was asking for. So I took that question and I prepared my presentation giving that information to people, because if he was aware of that, people also and wants to know. So it was a good source for information to our audience.
Like a professional anchor.
Yes, that's so.
If you would have to think, doctor, about the success, the biggest success in the weather forecast that you ever made, you know, that kind of thing that you take a lot of risk in and finally it happened like you said it was going to, what would that be? Which one?
Well, we have had success in many cases, but I would prefer to talk about the challenges. And the big challenge to me, and I guess that for many others in Cuba, is hurricane threatening Havana. Because it's a big city.
It's an old city.
Old city, 2 million inhabitants. And the last hurricane to hit Havana was in 1944, many years ago. It was like Sandy in New York. And Sandy had 57 people that were dead in New York. We only have 9 in Santiago de Cuba and 2 in Guantanamo, 11. But it is a big difference, because they didn't expect that the hurricane
Would hit with that strength?
Well, it was not so strong as hurricane when he was in New York, but the storm surge inundated many blocks in the city. So many people didn't expect that.
Did not have the culture.
Yes, didn't
And
have
Cuba,
the culture.
we have that kind of
As you
culture.
call it, that's true.
You would say that your obsession or your biggest fear is a hurricane hitting Havana?
Yep, that's my
Wow.
biggest fear.
That's something that you would never like
I
to
know,
forecast.
I don't want to see it, but I know it would happen someday, because the history of Havana is full of hurricanes in many years. We have in the centuries, in the 20th century, we had 2 big hurricanes in Havana, 1926 and 1944. was a big hurricane, 262 kilometers of winds, and lasted for many hours. And Havana withstood the pressure of the hurricane. I think that with the organization and the knowledge we have today about the hurricane and the information we gave and our civil defense, we can withstand the challenge. But, however, it is threatening. I wouldn't want to see it.
Anyway, at least you know that people will only believe what this center and specifically you would say about it.
Well, I'm very proud of it, and I thank our people for that and for the love.
And I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.